Yeah, we're starting to get warm. I think we were at like 89 today. So that's the main thing. Yeah, and so I apologize if I have to go early today. I don't know yet, but I might get a call at some point.
No problem. We'll see if
Uh,
anybody shows up. I started the stream, see if anybody comes to our party. If not, we'll split early. No problem.
yeah.
So
So,
talk to me. What's going on in the chat room, man? I can't keep up with all your stuff.
yeah, I try to keep abreast of what's out there. Sometimes some of it's so controversial. I don't know. I don't know if it makes for good podcast stuff.
Well,
But
for good podcasts, the more controversial, the better.
yeah, I guess I don't know if everybody agrees. Let's put it that way. So
Oh,
the big one, a big one in the past week or so was men really seem to be falling behind. They seem to be falling behind in school, in the job market, in college
dating.
attendance, and dating, and it all affects the dating. Like
Yeah.
I pulled up a stat today, which I was already aware of this, but I found the stat. Basically, 4 out of 5 women date a man who has more education than them. So if you don't have education, who are you? If you don't have a college education, who are you dating? You know what I mean? Are you dating high school dropouts, kind of thing? So, and that was from the census, I think. So there's that, and then
What if you're more educated and you don't have any money?
that doesn't help, but that's not true on average. So on average,
Okay.
somebody who's educated does make more money. That's important to know. But then the other thing is, women. They say women in college aren't even interested in dating. They said it was a big Wall Street Journal that came out, and it said 50%, 50 some percent of college men are interested in romance, and only 30% of college women are. So guys aren't even able to.
Well,
Uh,
define romance.
well, we could get into that, but it was definitely more general. It was not about one night stands, what have you. It was about in romantic relationships, and it looks like a minority of women are interested in that, and so it's really interesting. And there's a guy, Richard Reeves, who has a big book out right now that does all the podcast circuits, and he talks about how boys' frontal lobe, to bring this back to the brain, it seems to mature like 2 to 3 years later than a woman's. So literally, and Scott Galloway is another professor online podcaster who says this all the time, but so like an 18-year-old girl, she's competing against a 16-year-old guy, even if he's the same age as her, when it comes to school. And men do worse in school, unfortunately. And they have more ADHD, or at least diagnosed ADHD. So there's ideas that maybe men behave less, and well, we know they behave less. We know that they get more infractions, and I don't know
Did
what it
you?
is. And there's even studies showing, well, on the whole, young people are losing empathy. There's a University of Kansas researcher that has found that we've lost 40% of our empathy. But the other thing was, it seems like young women in particular, and Jordan Peterson have talked about this. G, Healthy Gamer, who's a Harvard psychiatrist on YouTube. He's a big YouTuber, one of the top mental health ones. He said it. Young women seem to be becoming more avoidant. They seem to be becoming less interested in relationships in general, and so it's unclear. And the countries, we're not having kids. We're not having kids.
Right.
Right now, Florida. You asked about Florida. There's a bill in the state house of Florida, I believe it's the House, to loosen child labor restrictions because, and this is why I say it's controversial, like it or not, some of the people we're deporting are going to have been laborers, and the Florida is very dependent on agriculture, so they're trying to get more labor from the youth. So all of this affects us long term. The other thing that's affecting things is housing costs. The average home price, I think this is nationally, but I know the Gainesville numbers real well. Redfin, which is like an online price listing for homes, the average house in our town had doubled between 2019 and 2013, and it's still real high. I think it might have come down a tick or something. But what that happens is it delays family formation. And There's a lot of good guys, people that talk about this, rather, not just guys, but that you need kids to help an economy continue to grow and to pay in taxes for when everybody retires so that there's money in Social Security. And so I don't know what the answer is.
Tariffs.
Yeah, there's at least one guy who thinks that. I don't even know what we're seeking to get from the tariffs, but anyway, because I don't even think he stated, but yeah.
Well, no, seriously, go back to around 1900 and let's look at how the finances of the country back then. He does have a point. I mean, a lot more things are going on now, but we have more technology and processes now. So, anywho, do you see anything
controversial? What's that?
Oh, thank goodness we got Joshua. He's all about the controversy.
How's it going?
Oh, wait. What do you say? Hold, please.
Oh, no.
There we go. I got the audio working.
All right.
Sweet.
Can you hear me now?
Yep. I can hear you now.
Got it. Okay. I had a little trouble getting into the studio, but I figured it out. Hi.
All right. Yeah. Hello, my friend.
How are you guys doing today?
We're talking to you, brother. What's going on out there?
We have sun again today, and we did not have any hail or thunderstorms or anything, no apocalypse. So, yeah.
That's the joke. Yeah. Like, how is it sunny in Oregon or Washington, rather? So, yeah.
I wasn't joking. People really did leave early from work thinking that something bad was going to happen.
Wow.
I'm not joking. They really did. I was the last one in the building when I got off the podcast. But just sun. So Oregon's weird. Washington's weird.
So what
are you guys doing?
Well, great. We're Anthony's going down his list, and I was wondering if you've had any different types of clients coming through.
Yeah, I think it's been a really interesting week. Always had some really good pre-post, QEGs. Those are always fun. Seeing brains speed up, those are fun. I did finish a draft for the second edition of my book, so it's like the author's copy. It's got the big not for resale across it, and I put like 6 or 7 new case studies in there because I have so many good examples now. There's just really good pre-post examples.
Looks like we got a question.
Well, we got Radar and we got Talbo back. Thank you. And Anthony.
It's a good question.
Yeah. This is, everyone wants to learn how to become a workaholic. That's what, if I had to wonder what people are coming to neuro, it's how do I become more productive? And it's like, I don't know how to tell you this, Radar. This is my take. I don't know if that's possible because I don't know how many people think workaholics are real nice people. Like, I don't know how many people wanted to get close to Steve Jobs and Michael Jordan and Kobe.
Anthony's got it. Yeah.
Yeah. There is a thing that Andrew Huberman mentioned, which I liked, which is if somebody who can't stop their mind going, if they could get into a point of maybe practicing some form of mindfulness, he likes to think of it as, and I kind of hope so too, that there could be like a creator mode rather than like a creativity mode that you can get into. So you're working smarter, not harder. But that for me would be like, if somebody had me to flip a magic switch, I'd rather become more creative than become a machine, let's say.
Well, classically creative from the psychometric standpoint, like from the psychological term creative, that's not associated with positive things either. So, like, what's that?
Tell me about that. Yeah. What have you heard?
So, according to classic psychometrics, which is one of the few hard sciences within psychology, that means that it's an area of psychology that you can get the same results if you repeat the research. And the vast majority of psychology, you cannot repeat the research and get the same results. But psychometrics, you can. And it shows that classic creativity, which means that you have divergent thinking, and you kind of find your own way of doing things, and you find your own way of arriving somewhere. Right. You become kind of an artist, is you can actually generate something that is actually original. That's only found in 1% of the population. We don't we remontage other people's things, but we don't come up with our own ideas. And that 1% has only recently been accommodated by society in a mutually exploitive, beneficial way, meaning that you can be benefited by society exploiting your creativity in a way that benefits society. And that's like a mutual beneficial thing. But if you go back 100 years or heaven forbid 200 years, you'd be dead at your age. It doesn't go well for you. You know, very, very few creatives succeeded historically until recently.
Is this the whole kind of thought around, you know, artists are bipolar and stuff like that? Because
it's fair argument, maybe. Yeah.
Well, there was a recent finding, and like you said, it's worth it to always retain a grain of salt. What they found was artists are not more bipolar, but interestingly, their siblings might be, kind of thing. And they think they're close enough to the bipolar type. At least one study, they're close enough to it to have some of the divergent thinking, let's say, but they're not so close to have all of the downsides, like a Van Gogh or like a Kanye or something.
Kanye, love it.
You're right, and I know that some of our greatest have been very divergent, neurodivergent, but I do think I think there's probably opportunity for everyone to become maybe a little more creative. Like, for instance, let's say you have a lot of frontal slowing and you address that, you get rid of that and you activate the frontal lobe. In theory, like Jay talks about, that's cognitive flexibility might be restored. And on Jay's addict study, I know you agree, but I'm just throwing in for the listeners. Jay did a study on addicts, on addiction himself, and there's like 33 subjects, and they did cognitive exams on these people. They did two things to the people that I saw, maybe three. It was SMR. They did frontal suppression of the alpha, theta, or beta at the cingulate, and they did I think on some of them they may have done alpha, theta. But
you're right.
But those people, Jay says, and the paper says, they had 20 and 30 point increases, I think, on standard cognitive exams, which I think includes. Oh, well, here's the man.
Speak of the devil.
Yeah.
Jay, you've been quoted about 6 times already.
Yeah.
Save us.
That's why I had to call in, you know. I have to defend myself.
Well, Josh was mentioning, and I'm sure there's truth that in psychology and in psychometrics, that some of the most creative people, there may be trade-offs with, I don't remember the term he used, but maybe mental illness, let's say. And then I kind of
hypothesized that, but just that the 1% that's hyper creative is not associated up until recently historically with positive utility.
Yeah. And then I kind of said that I hope that we can, maybe you can't become Picasso, and maybe you wouldn't want to be, but maybe you can get a little more creative. And so what are your thoughts, Jay?
Well, we first of all, creativity is in the eye of the beholder to a certain extent. So it's not something that's easily pinned down. There was a group that tried to look at creatives and their EEG. They were called the other 90%, like you only use 10%, you know, so they were the other 90%. And it was funded by the guy who funded Atari. So they had money, and they bought one of the first lexicors that was ever made. I mean, it was a very early approach at this, but they brought creative folks in from Silicon Valley because, you know, Atari, you know, could get folks that were creative or thought to be creative, and that they recorded a bunch of them. And Julian Isaacs, who's passed recently, was running the project, and he thought he found what creativity was, the EEG signal for creativity, and he was all excited. He knew I knew EEG really well, so he asked me to come look at it. And he showed me these maps with theta at the back of the head, and he was adamant that that was creativity. And I said, well, it's theta at the back of the head, but is it creativity? Let's look at the raw waveforms. You can't map something without taking step 1. You're going to make a mess when you take step 2. You're going to step in it. So let's go back and look at the EEG. There's lambda all over the EEG. Now, eyes open and eyes closed is lambdoid. They probably were visualizing And as creatives, visualization is not creativity, it's visualization. You know, and visualizers are probably have a step up for people who can't visualize, but it's not creativity. It's just, you know, it's a piece of the puzzle. It's not really a solution. And um, I have to say that if you find people that are uniquely creative in their own way and they've come up with something that's not usual, they're probably a bit divergent. Now, I'm not saying divergent meaning ASD spectrum. It could be, you know, quite easily. I mean, the savant is typically viewed as likely an autism, you know, a spin-off into a special knowledge of some sort. But it's not always ASD. Yeah, you can end up developing a special knowledge from just digging in, with a deep curiosity and a lot of obsessive drive. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to end up getting there. But I don't know that we can like define creativity in a way there's pieces of it. Like I say, visualization is probably a skill that goes towards creativity for some things.
Well, Radar here had two questions and that started us on this topic. And his first question was, would there be a way to gain, I'm going to paraphrase him, so-called positive autistic traits such as extreme focus, he mentions, and then two, is a hot singlet associated with intelligence? So I don't know where you want to take this.
Let's step away from the hot singlet for a second.
Okay.
Hot meaning beta, hot meaning delta, hot meaning red in a map. I mean, what do you mean hot? If your singlet's really truly hot, you're really screwed, you know. I mean, somebody's baking your head. Some Cuban beam or something. Who knows?
Oh, good one.
But you know, the singlet is responsible for emotional and cognitive flexibility, and for people who over focus and stay focused. Now, it's a useful trait. It's not a great state, you know. So if you're stuck in it, it's pathology. But if you use the singlet for what it can be used for, put a saddle on that horse, you win the damn race. You know, so there's nothing wrong with using your singlet. Gerard Finnemore, who's a psychologist in South Africa, he's been in the field for a long time. He studies extreme athletes. And we're talking about rowing across the Atlantic or running on one of those 3-day runs where half the people damn near die, you know, one of those kinds of athletes. And the thing that they found uniquely across all of them was they had a singlet issue. But if you didn't, you wouldn't do that stuff. You know, I mean, you've got to stick to it all the way across the Atlantic. You can't go halfway and say, well, feels pretty good. You know, I loosened up pretty nice. You know, I'm feeling fine. The weather's turning a little funny. The food's getting funky. You know, I'm gonna call it. You know, people who do the whole thing end up having to have that obsessive drive. That, you know, they run with blisters and, you know, stuff that normal people wouldn't put up with. You know, so
I do want to say I do think though it feels like I haven't yet heard from somebody who, let's say, did neurofeedback and cleared their phenotypes and their singlet, cleared their brain, that they felt like they had more trouble focusing. I wouldn't guess that would be the result. I don't know what you feel about that.
Well, I don't know of anybody who's complained of being less focused from routine work. I have seen people complain about under arousal and affective side effect from alpha theta if it wasn't done properly. You have to remember, Peniston, when he came out with alpha theta training, they did some pre-treatment. You know, they didn't just go, oh, you need alpha theta, and they put the electrodes on and, you know, went for it. They did some temperature training or electrodermal training, which teaches a sympathetic nervous system to calm down. And they did that prior. Now, they also did imagery. There's a lot of things they did. It wasn't just alpha theta. So, it's embedded within a therapeutic environment as well. And there's a difference between the outcomes, for instance, in neurofeedback, where it's neurofeedback in a closed room with nobody doing anything, versus being done in a therapeutic environment with somebody discussing how your session went and having designed it for you and have, actual therapeutic intent. So, but I would suggest that the autism spectrum population has some unique characteristics, and it gives us insight into certain brain functions, and that's a wonderful thing. From a kind of a terrible circumstance, you can gain unique knowledge about brain function due to pathology. But then, actually, a couple of the big surges in knowledge about brain function came. Reitan-Halstead test battery. This is after the war with brain injuries, and you see this part missing in a whole bunch of people, and they all got the same presentation. You go, maybe that part does that. So Halstead did all that groundwork, grunt work, neurosurgery, neuropsychological correlate stuff. Reitan took a humongous test that took multiple days, the Halstead, and he criterion keyed it down to a fewer number of items. It still took 2 or 3 days, but a Reitan-Halstead test battery gives you a wildly deep look into neuropsychological function with a lot of different test subsets. And but Reitan stuck his name on it and called it the Reitan-Halstead. But all he did is, these questions test the same thing. Use one question. Don't stick your name on the front. Put it as a PS or something. Anyway, the neuropsychological insights came from observing pathology.
So
has autism always been around, Jay?
Yeah.
Or we just started to notice it in the last 20 years?
It's been around. We've gotten better at noticing it, and there's also more things lumped into it. Originally, the Asperger's type wasn't an autistic because autistics couldn't speak, and so the full autism, the DSM-5 threw out the term Asperger's, which I thought actually was a little bit utility, but oh well, it's gone. You basically end up having autism around for a long time. The incidence may have been going up over time. It appears that there's probably some of that that's real, and some of that that's observational acuity. DSM having characterized it, and more diagnostics are being done. So, but there's also genetic groups that are lumped into the same spectrum, and they know it. That you have this genetic variant, but you're as opposed to calling you that genetic variant, you're lumped into the autism spectrum. So,
if you have a hot singlet, you're tied, you're focused in on something, and you're in a routine, and nothing else matters. That's why Jobs, Jack Welch, insert great business tycoon in here, and he treated his family like shit because he was locked on to the business.
That's because he was a jerk, actually. But other
well, let's get back to your favorite jerk, Elon Musk. I mean, he has Asperger's, or whatever the hell you want to call it. How is that affecting him? And maybe he should play the mental health route a little bit more. He might get more sympathy.
I don't know what he has. If you haven't examined somebody, you really have very little basis to say.
You examine Musk every day,
I
Jay.
have not seen his EEG. I won't comment on his brain function until I see his EEG. His behavior is a bit off, but so is mine.
But that
So
back to radar for a second, which is Jay saw it. It was a meme of like what did autistic people? What was that like 50 years ago? And it shows it's a SpongeBob. It shows people tied up. You know, this is what we did with autistic kids back then. I had a friend that commented. He said, "Well, back when he's a little older. He's I don't know if he's 50. He said back in my day, we just called them odd." And I kind of talked with him for a minute. And what he was saying is, well, if it's, do we really need to call it something if it's just you're a little bit autistic? He wouldn't even dispute. And here's the thing for radar too. I just looked up, and this is in the spirit of informed consent. Even people with so-called high functioning autism report a lower quality of life. And so they report things like worse executive functioning and social interaction, challenges with maintaining relationships, finding employment. Autistic people are much more likely to be divorced, much more likely to be unemployed, even early mortality. And this is, you can just look up high functioning. So I would caution somebody. And then on the focus thing, a friend of mine, I just talked to him yesterday. He got his EEG, and it's very eye-opening, but he's like, he has a few of the like high arousal patterns, and he has a ton of midfrontal theta. And he says, this makes so much sense because when I am at work, I did a spreadsheet yesterday for 9 hours, and I woke up, it was like I was waking up from a trance. Like he was dissociated. And he's like, and to be honest, he's like, I don't know if I used that 9 hours. I don't know if that was better spent on something else, but he in his work, he almost couldn't help himself. And so I just think probably there's a balance, and maybe sometimes you get lucky and your balance becomes Musk, but probably the rest of us maybe want a little more balance.
well, and I don't know that Musk is anything to emulate either.
Right.
I agree.
Why would training infralow at T3, T4 increase theta at CZ and FC for someone? Thank you, Radar.
More drowsy? No.
You'd have to look at the circumstance on the individual, but T3, T4 infralow frequency, infraslow stuff is usually things that drive down the arousal level and increase drowsiness. So you'd kind of expect some of those changes.
It's in the
everything.
details.
Everything needs a balance, and that's if something is inhibitory, you have to balance it with something that's excitatory. Otherwise, you just go into shutdown. Inhibit beyond a rational balance, and you have to have that. You have to have the counter available and ready to go. If you push somebody beyond a balance point, you have to know how to push back.
Is the ISF generally inhibiting? Is that what I'm understanding there, Jay? Or
it depends upon what's being trained. You can turn on or off a brain area using infraslow, infralow, slow cortical potentials. If you train the cortex in an area to go electronegative, that cortical layer, the basal membrane electronegative, the brain is very activated. If you teach it to go electropositive, it's inactivated. And there's quite a bit of the work that's done interhemispherically with a specific frequency that I don't know. Over time, we'll see how all of that pans out. There's multiple groups that think they have the answer and the other groups don't. This is not unusual.
So is it is the
I've been in
ISF
the field long enough to know
training...
that there are lots of groups that thought they had it originally, and the church-like groups, they believe that this is the protocol. But over time the science will show what works and what doesn't work, and the slow cortical potential has a real solid science showing that you can train specific cortical locations to activate or inactivate. The interhemispheric folks have a ways to go before they can show all of the frequency, specificity, and all of that stuff. But they're working on it, and they've got some pretty major people working on it. So give them another decade. That they should have kicked the tires long enough to figure out all the ins and outs of their protocol.
We have a question on bullying, but I just want to say, is ISF generally training the electropositive or electronegative of the slow cortical potentials? Depends.
They're doing between two spots at a specific frequency.
Okay.
And that unless you're measuring, you don't really know which one's going which way.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
so it's not what I do. So you should ask somebody that does that for guidance as to exactly,
Yeah.
It's something I do a lot of, and you essentially
Oh.
have a tone for electropositive and you have a tone for electronegative, and it's not so much referred to as training as much as it is, I think the term that's been used is system signaling. So they don't think of it as operant conditioning, even if it is. They've called it things like system signaling.
I guess
So-
I would wonder what's happened to the EEG after. Would you say that people generally have like increased amplitudes and things afterwards, or maybe decreased, or is there a
Depends how good
trend?
you are at it. That devils in the details. But I generally see a significant reduction of global slow issues if I'm working on someone who has a lot of like global slowing, and I see a reduction of frontal beta spindles a lot of the time. It's good at that kind of stuff, which is good because when you see those, you really want to get rid of them. So I find it useful, but I don't only
Cool.
use it. I mix it with amplitude training, which makes me less popular with both groups. Is what it
So,
is.
so Talaba brought.
you
sorry.
can be equally unpopular with everybody if you use
Yeah.
all the techniques.
I take everybody off. Yeah.
And I think that, by the way, Josh, I think that's cool that you've tried many different. I feel
Mhm.
like you've practiced and told me a lot of different methods, and I think that's
Mhm.
really valuable. So
I try to
thank you.
try everything, and I try to give everybody a fair shot, even groups that I don't admire, and I don't like their rhetoric. I'll try it, and I'm a little bit surprised sometimes at what has worked, even if I don't like their culture. Is what
Yeah.
it is.
I hear you.
For example,
culture.
No, I don't want to use
Mm.
examples.
Culture. In the United States, what's culture? Yogurt?
Oh man,
Close enough. Yes.
I saw a meme. I saw a meme yesterday. It said somebody said that sometimes intergenerational trauma that gets passed down becomes culture, and I was like, whoa, that's deep. So, but Talaba mentioned
going back to the cartoon with the tied up,
yeah,
characters.
Mhm.
I like that.
There were families that had someone in the attic or in the basement, that they just didn't let out of the house.
Yeah.
I worked at a state hospital just before they let everybody out of the state hospitals. It went from 2,000 plus people to 700 and something over a 3-year period. So, and there was an adolescent ward that was basically full of autistic and attachment and disordered kids, and that they were incorrigible for school and whatnot, and they were abandoned by their families into a state institution. So yeah, the bad old days were really bad, and the state hospital is nowhere you want to end up being. It's
Jay, you bring that up. I believe the hospital beds for mental health are down 75% back when you were doing your North Dakota gig. Is that right size? Do you think there should be more places to go instead of the emergency room?
In fact, the state hospital as a gigantic institutional holding pen for everything is not the right way to do it. Smaller regional and local halfway houses and
County jail
treating facilities. Occasionally, the jail is where somebody is going to end up because of behavioral issues, but if you can help them to the point where they're manageable, usually a halfway house and that sort of thing is better.
It's worth
There
mentioning.
are people that are going to
jails-
end up in a state hospital because you have the for the mentally insane, where they're if they have a chance, they'll kill somebody, or suicidally serious about suicide, and suicide's still a crime. Try and kill yourself and see if you don't get in trouble. So you can go to jail for trying to kill yourself. So
I was a counselor at a level 5 security rehab long-term facility, so 1-2-year facility.
Wow.
People would be there for a long time. It was the last ones that existed, and it's now closed. They cut the funding because they wanted to reduce the state funding. The problem was that it cost 25% of what it cost to send one of these people to jail, and they will go to jail instead of being here. So it wasn't a really smart piece of legislation. So I'm a big advocate of these state programs. 9 beds is kind of an easy thing to manage because you can put those in like large houses. But we had a 54-bed facility for more than 12 months. Fantastic program.
There was an article in Financial Times about Japan, and it was about Japan has very low homelessness. And the article drew a direct line between the low homelessness and the fact that they have many more mental health hospital beds. And I defer to Jay on, how those should be set up, and to Josh on what programs people need. But I know that I think the story is JFK began the I guess decrease of those beds because his sister died, or she had a lobotomy in a state health hospital, Rosemary Kennedy, and he was very affected by that. And then I think Reagan supposedly continued to reduce the funding for those things. But I have heard some, reasonable sounding arguments that maybe we need more. So
the alternative is homeless. If that's the case,
yeah,
maybe that's not better.
Most of the North Dakota State Hospital buildings have been retrofit as day jails for people that are in jail, but they're let out during the day to go to work, that sort of thing. And there's a women's prison that's there that is a very low security risk women's prison, but they've used the buildings for other things. I don't think that the multiple thousand centralized care mental hospitals are a good idea. It reminded me really a lot of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Wow.
I mean, way close. So I recognized the damn characters,
Oh wow!
And
Nurse Ratched.
So
I hear
yeah. We had 2 or 3 of those retired military nurses, and they're doing a good job, but they're military nurses. They're not warm and fuzzy. They ran the pharmacy like the drill sergeant might. So, but Native American population was a prominent portion of it in North Dakota. We've got the White Earth Indian Reservation, so I got to know quite a few of the Native Americans, and was invited to do all sorts of Native American stuff and Mandan. Wow. So that I had a goatee. They called me a goat. I look like
you're
a billy
greatest
goat
of all time.
And no, like it was a billy goat. And anyway, they thought of me as a kind of a fun animal person of some sort. So anyway, we never had any difficulties. It was a state hospital. You don't want to be there. It's the stories are they stop you cold.
Yeah.
Here, let me brighten everyone's afternoon. We're getting into that time of year where more sun is coming out, people are getting more energy, and they're coming out of the winter doldrums. And unfortunately, this is a time where people get to the end of their rope and we have unfortunate situations. Is there anything we can do in neurofeedback to give people a little oomph so they don't fall into that rut? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, sometimes when you wake up in the spring, you're a bear, So,
or the summer or the fall.
We can tune up everybody. There's nobody that doesn't need a tune-up. And go to Indianapolis 500 and see how many times a day they tune up those cars. They're high performance. I mean, if you want to be high performance, you got to really do a lot of tuning, a lot of training. So we could help a lot of people get through the energetic dips and wobbles that happen seasonally. Some people have seasonal affective disorders, and they're getting better this time of year. They got worse as it got darker, and now as it gets lighter, they have more sun exposure, the pineal gland is kicking out melatonin like it should, and they're sleeping better. And but we have a lot to do. If somebody came in with a complaint of seasonal affective disorder or affective disorders of any sort, we would measure their EEG and find out what's going on. Occasionally you'll find something as well as is metabolic or toxic or something that's different, but we can see mood issues and we can do tune-ups really nicely. And they're not like a rebuild. This is not like taking somebody who's an intractable epileptic and reconstructing how their brain is wired. This is a fine adjustment, and it's fairly quick. So.
Yeah, that's great.
Can pregnant women get neurofeedback, Jay?
Yes. It's a lot better than the meds that they might get. You know, Barry Sturman had a woman come to him and said, I want to get pregnant and have kids, and I'm on an anticonvulsant, and I can't as long as I'm on an anticonvulsant because of the birth defects. So Barry worked with her, and as he presents the story, and now, boom, he shows she's got kids. And I raised my hand. Barry, you're not claiming parentage, are you? You know, so, but he saved her ability to have a child by getting her off of the toxic medication, so she could have a child.
That's cool.
Postpartum depression, a wonderful opportunity for at-home training because they're going to be home. You know, you're not getting out for a while. You know, your sleep is going to be screwed up. I mean, you know, brand new newborn in the house, it makes things real difficult. But we can end up working wonders with people's moods. So,
Talbot, next break I'll put in chat. We had Seaburn Fisher. She did a tour of duty on the show, and she talked about in vitro neurofeedback. Pretty interesting stuff. You might want to check that out.
Jay, real quick on the subject of, because Radar mentioned, you know, we have people on the streets that include mentally ill people. And I came across something, and people, you know, always check this.
Hey, I haven't been out of the house in weeks.
Well, not you. Basically, what I heard is we've heard or may have heard that schizophrenic people may be violent. And something I heard was, and it was actually, it's been on Joe Rogan, but other places too, they're actually supposedly more likely to be violent when they come off of medication. And they're very tempted to come off of their medication because they use essentially dopamine blockers, and it gives flat affect very often. And so that I looked it up, it's been a little bit, but that I looked it up, that seemed true, that they're actually not violent unless they're coming out. And we have a guy here in town, he's famous, he's always on UF campus, he's clearly not medicated, and he will threaten people. I don't think he's gotten violent, but he will threaten them. And so I didn't know if you've heard about that, and maybe the utility of NF in schizophrenia, if you wanted to mention that.
Neurofeedback in schizophrenia isn't a big population that's treated. However, it has been worked with. One of the first and one of the more effective ones working with it has been Tanju Sirmeli over in Istanbul. He's worked with psychotics, and schizophrenia is obviously in that category, as well as Down syndrome. He's worked with a lot of categories that would just be assumed, well, why, you know, and to good effect. So it, you know, you can stabilize the unstable beta spindling that's seen in schizophrenia, that they step on very heavily with their meds. And if somebody's hearing command voices, you can usually see 32, 33, 34 hertz peak in the beta range up in the 30s, which is not usually it kind of fades off. You know, above 30, there's very little interest. Some databases just quit there, you know. So, but you know, faster frequencies are crucially important for consciousness and altered consciousness. So,
yeah.
Don't mind me. I'm looking for Radar stuff. Continue.
You know,
Mhm.
you can also find schizophrenics who are not violent, but
Yeah.
when threatened, just shut down,
Sure.
and they'll become an akinetic mute and won't respond.
Wow.
What
So
about
Is that when
bipolar?
the dopamine stops working, Jay? Is that the idea with the akinetic mutism or?
akinetic mutism is a cingulate issue again, but
Yeah.
you can get to the don't respond point.
Yeah.
Kropotov, Yuri had an akinetic mute sent to his lab for them to figure out. This the head of neuroscience in the Soviet Union at the time, and so
Mhm.
they sent the fellow in, and for quite a period of time they were trying to get him to talk. Poking here, poking there, insult his mother, do whatever you can to get him to respond. No
Mhm.
response whatsoever. Because arm up, his arm stays up. He was an akinetic mute, a Gumby figure, and you they finally gave up trying. They
Mhm.
touched him with hot things. You could turn up the temperature on something to create heat to the point of it almost being damaging, and no response, no response, no response. So finally, through the eye socket, they put in a cannula to the anterior cingulate, and they put just a little bit of liquid nitrogen and froze that sucker. Igor, or whatever his name is, pops up like toast. Interactive, chatting, and they say,
Mhm.
we tried to get you to talk for the last week. We were poking you. We were insulting your mother and your lineage, and the painful things, loud sounds, bright lights, nothing. We could get no response. What was going on inside of you for the last few days when we were hassling you, trying to get you to talk? He says, I just didn't feel like responding. It's just he just shut down, and he would not respond to things that normally would get a response involuntarily. So it was a full system shutdown, and that's off the anterior cingulate. Get rid of that, you're no longer frozen. Well, except for that spot. So a little touch of liquid nitrogen did it in.
Jay, I'm going through all your reports here because Haida, how you doing, Haida? Can you please put the link on Jay's article about the phenotypes, please? And I'm going through, and you got a whole bunch of them in here. Which is the best one that you have? The one with Markheim?
The articles on phenotypes. Phenotypes for what purpose? There's one that talks about medication and ADD, ADHD, and the phenotypic patterns that predict each one of those. That's, I think, a 2014 medication prediction with phenotypes. But it basically, at the beginning of the article, it says, well, to keep things simple, we're going to talk about ADD. And I list all the meds that can be given, and there's a whole bunch of them that are given for ADD. So some that you wouldn't necessarily think of. Oxytocin, to increase social bonding, reduces mu. I mean, there's all sorts of them. And I go through, and here's the list, and the neurochemistry that they're influencing with the medication. And then I talk about the phenotypes and what medication they predict. And so that and at the end of the article, I say, remember when I said we're just going to talk about ADD? Well, if you see these patterns, give these medications, because the illusion of ADD being the DSM category is the illusion. If you have these patterns, you need these meds. And the ADD diagnostic category doesn't predict this. The EEG does. So it's above and beyond a diagnostic category. These are divergent patterns in the brain and how to treat them. So that one's good. The original paper was 2005. Johnstone, Lunt, and myself, and there's a bunch since then. So Martine's discussions about phenotype stuff is really quite good. He's actually advanced stuff and tested the slow alpha is one of the biomarkers that they're hot on right now. That they think that's and it predicts medication failure for a lot of folks. But if you know it's there, you can address it with the appropriate medication.
Then Talbot wants to follow up. If a pregnant woman receives neurofeedback, does the fetus benefit from it in any way? I can tell you, Sieber and Fisher, double thumbs up on that one. Check out the show. But Jay, you got something to add on that?
So imagine the mother with a baby just starting. During the next 9 months, the neurochemistry and how psychiatrically disturbed she might be by circumstances is going to be transmitted to the baby. There's an epigenetic passing on of stressors. If the mother's level of cortisol is high, it changes the brain's development within the baby. So the baby comes out with a different level of responsiveness to the outside world. So yeah, it's extremely useful. If you cut down on the level of stress, which isn't changing stress, it's changing strain. Stress is okay, strain is not. So stressors get you up off your butt to go do something, but strain is the problem, and that's stress that's not handled properly.
Music helps, right?
Well,
continue. Somebody please ask a question.
I wanted to say, we talked about autism earlier. I forget why, but something I've been hyping on Facebook that I don't think I've ever seen a single person mention this. If you look it up, there is a 2 to 4x increased risk of autism in children born to obese mothers. And they think there may be relationships with inflammation. So maybe, I know thyroid is morbid, I guess, often with female obesity. But the point is, people are worried about vaccines or stuff they can't see or red dye number 5. But I have never seen an effect size in autism of 2 to 4x. If somebody has a bigger one, you feel free to email me. And I think it's 2x for ADHD, 2 to 4x again. So I don't know. This goes back to
and if
controlling
you
your
look at the
executive function.
Look at what leads to the fact that somebody is obese.
That's what I'm getting at. The executive function is usually, go on, Jay, sorry.
And there may be somebody who's obese because of hormonal upset or
thyroid,
various things. But obesity is often also dietary. And if you're not eating properly, you don't have enough B6, you're going to end up with the possibility of significant neuronal problems with the infant. Well, all this other stuff as well, but B6 is crucial. Spina bifida and brain anomalies that are really striking structural anomalies for B6. So.
But the thing on obesity, I had a little debate in one of the groups with a clinician, and he just said, he was adamant. He's like, if I can quit heroin, people should be able to stop eating. And I was upset because he acknowledges, at least if he's an EEG tech or a neurofeedback clinician, to me, that's an implicit agreement that neurophysiology matters as far as your behavior. So that's one. And I will tell you, obesity and frontal slowing are correlated, and that's affecting their executive function, their choices, thus their behavior. And then the one other thing is, you can quit heroin, and I'm sure it's difficult, but you can't quit eating. That's not an option. And so you can
change your type of eating and what you eat and everything. But Dirk de Ritter in his lab has actually looked at the anterior cingulate and craving. When excessive craving leads to excessive eating. So the craving is really a key there, and it's a drive. And if you have that drive, you will feed. And it's an obsessive drive at that point. So what else are you going to do? You know, you have OCD lock on to food, and your craving is going to end up getting satisfied. If it's, you know, some people craving is a rare thing, and is, you know, the odd once a month got to have chocolate or something, you know, whatever. But there's people that have cravings on an ongoing basis. They showed that you can actually turn that down using slow cortical potential training. Well, infra-slow or infra-low, whichever. I can't remember which group it was that was linked in with it. They get kind of snippy about which name it's called, but you know, oh well. If you want to be upset with me, take a number and stand in line. Yeah, I don't serve the line, but you can stand there. You know. So.
Jay, about your papers, there have been people asking for papers, and I was wondering, obviously you may have zero control over this. It has been a little difficult at times to find free public sources of your papers. I don't know if that's anything you have any say in. You know, I have no clue how it works, but I just wanted to mention it.
Well, in groups that I do talks for, the EEG reviews on an ongoing basis, the review groups, student groups, that sort of thing, I hand out a gigantic folder of papers and articles and stuff. And
it's pretty sweet.
You know, I've plagiarized from the best sources I could find. You know, so,
great artists steal, right?
Yeah. So it's, you know, it's just a collection of stuff I've got, and I refer to papers within it quite often as I'm talking about something. It'll be illustrated by one of the papers, so I'll, you know, jump out, go to that folder, pop it open, pull up, and there's a bunch of folders within it that are a bunch of you know, bits and pieces about a specific topic that have kind of clustered some articles together, but a lot of it's just one article after another. So
at times I've actually dropped those into some AI software and trained the model on it so that when Jay references things, I'll actually appeal to it and it will tell me which paper that is, which has been useful at times, like to quickly reference.
And when it says there isn't any such quote, I made it up.
Yeah.
You know, AI is good for that sort of thing. Rostam Yamash asked his AI what it would take to create a virtual J, because I'm not going to last forever, and
we're working on it.
And it spit out a reasonable answer that they'd have to gather pretty much everything I've ever said and everything I've ever written to end up having that as a data access, and then, you know, scanning. But you know, geez, scan me at a younger age or something, you know. So, can't you do better than this? You know.
What are you talking about? You have the alpha peak of a man half your age or something. Alpha speed, yeah.
The 0.005% of the population have a 13 hertz alpha. You know, some crazy figure like that. The Koreans actually have a stat, but it's between 8 and 12. You know, and you get up at the 11 plus, you get into the low percentage. But when you're outside that range, what are you? An outlier.
You have to have something called pulsed frontal midline theta to keep that stable, right?
Yeah. 13 hertz alpha. Let's put it this way: not every engine can burn nitromethane. You know, try it sometime in your car. You know, you know, it is power that's unbelievable, but you can blow the damn thing up. And I've known quite a few people that were sharp as a tack, hyperphrenic, you know, busy brain, very, very, very bright, wrote code for 3-dimensional manipulation of MRI images and stuff. I mean, astoundingly brilliant. But they went totally off track. I mean, they went state hospital route. Loony as can be. I've only seen one of them come back from that, and he wasn't really quite right. I've seen a few kind of say they're back from that, but they're not okay at all. That they have more magical thinking mixed in with their regular thinking, and it kind of makes it hard to deal with.
Haida's got a good wrap-up question. Jay, you mentioned the groups that you chat in and you put the reports, and you got any groups you can recommend that Haida can go check out on the interweb?
There's a group that's organized out of Australia, and I think the per session fee may be a little bit larger because the guy's paying himself to run it, and that kind of thing. There's also groups in the US that just figure how many people want to do it this for the next 6, every other week for 2 hours. And the number that say they divide my fee by that, and they pay a pittance for a session. I'm not in it for the money. I just, but they pay for my time.
Well, people can just follow you, Jay, and then stuff pops up that's free that they can pop in, right?
Well, there's other small groups that have been very small, and they stay very small because they actually want to have some of their data looked at. The large groups send data in, but you might not get your data seen. If there's 50 people, I'm not going to do 50 EEGs in a 2-hour period. But maybe 3 or 4 cases in an hour if I'm really moving along. But occasionally there'll be a really interesting case that will take some deeper analysis, and I might spend 30-40 minutes on one case. So it's a grand rounds sort of a circumstance, and it's not, if you have to have one seen and read because that's something you have to get done, it's different than, oh, this is an interesting case, the group should see this. Those are the cases that I need to get to. And the group has seen a lot of pretty significant outlier circumstances, rhythmic temporal delta of cerebrovascular insufficiencies popped up a few times in one group, and how many times in your life are you going to see that?
Jay, let me rephrase the question. If you were in Suisun City in October and you want to, yes, what would you?
That's a good one.
What was I thinking?
Nice.
Yeah, if you can find Suisun City, there you go.
You can stream it, but it is really fun to show up in person. Like if you can swing it.
I have to say, it's the 3D version beats the hell out of the screen, and and you're going to run into stuff that's not streamed. That's really good stuff. I mean, when I used to go to meetings, and I can't go anymore. The keynote people that are talking have had their material out there for 2 or 3 years, or they wouldn't even know to invite them. So it's really not new stuff. It's different the first time they invited them, but the really new stuff is happening in the hallway. It's happening in the bar. It's happening at a dinner or a lunch break. The interpersonal friendships that you strike up are invaluable, and the networking. So
it ruined other conferences for me, by the way. Ruined them.
Well, that's not my fault. It's theirs.
Well, Haida, I posted the link in chat here. Check it out. They have a great bar. If you want to take a little breather, you might see me there.
We're live streaming it for I think $350 or $330 or something such as that for 3 days of video. But again, it's for a few $100 more. You're there in person. Student fees are I think $500-600 and $800-900 somewhere in that range for folks to full pay or early bird. But your early bird goes to the end of month, so there's plenty of time.
All right, and then if I'm in Washington,
I have to say, in about another week or so, we're going to get a count of how many people are early registering, and because we do max out at 80 seats in person, we'll probably at that point give people an idea as to whether they need to hurry and snap up the last one or just get it live streamed.
I'm trying to figure out if I can swing bringing some staff this time or not. That's my only decision. I'm delaying registering because I'm trying to decide if it's just going to be me or my wife or my employees as well. I can't decide.
Make them work for it. Merit-based. Joshua, if I'm in Washington and I need a little neuro help, what do I do?
We're alternative behavioral therapy. We're 2 miles north of Portland, Oregon. We can do consulting. We do neurofeedback. We do counseling. Yep.
And you got a book coming out, right? Can you show me that little
just a
stack
second
of
edition.
trees?
I'm doing the second edition, so we added like 6 or 7 case studies to it. This is the author's draft. So I got the hard copy. Looks good. I'm probably going to pull the trigger on it Friday and actually publish it. I took out 20, 30 pages. I added 50 or 60. So I like it better than the first edition. I think it's good. It's supposed to be easy read.
I would put a couple more pictures in there, Josh.
Yeah, there's like just humorously, by the way, there's like no profit because it's all high gloss print. So it's hilarious. But I did it because I wanted to. So that's fun.
Oh yeah. Anthony, if I get done yelling at people on Facebook about politics and I want to get onto something else, where should I go?
That's funny. Well, Hida, there are plenty of groups on Facebook too. There's a Neurofeedback Exchange and Neurofeedback Community and Brain Master. Those are and Jay is in a lot of those. So you can even just, if you have a question, I would even just search one of those groups and see if Jay's already responded to it. If you're trying to find out more, and then I have one called Science and Technology Discovery, and then to Radar and kind of everybody else. What Jay was talking about the new stuff, and I think what's old is new sometimes, and so I would just suggest to Radar and anybody else Jay said one time, when you clear the brain, many problems resolve. I overheard him say that. Just try clearing your brain of phenotypes, with a good clinician. See if that, because I've just seen many problems resolve in my close friends now. And I've also seen people become Radar. I can tell you're worried about productivity and things. I've seen them become very productive and quick. I mean, I have a friend now, I used to have to explain movies and things to them. They're explaining it to me. I can't even keep up. It's really kind of tremendous. At least what I've been privileged to see. So yeah, please check out Jay's papers and keep listening. Thanks, guys.
Anthony, is it possible you've changed?
I hope I've changed. I hope I changed. So yeah, and I'm still doing things and working on things as well.
Anthony, Joshua, Jay Gunkelman, thank you for showing up again. Great panel. Haida, Talabo. Let's see. Who else did we have? Oh, wait, hold on. Joshua, your cousin showed up. Oh, no, wait, that's you.
Pete, are we going to see a big on-air sign hanging around your neck?
That one back there. Yeah, that'll make the trip. That'll make the trip.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, guys. Have a great Wednesday night.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Hopefully the internet will survive.
Good to see you all.
All righty. Bye-bye.